Ceramic was also used on walls, believe it or not. If we went back into the ancient world and walked into a house, in our minds we see it just like a dirt floor and stone walls, but chances are even, you know, upper class, or not just upper class, but middle class, upper, lower class, they would have had some kind of a stone paving on the floor and then plaster on the walls. So the walls probably would have been plastered. Oftentimes they would have inscriptions on the walls. It's like when you walk into people's house today and they have these nice little plaques, you know, with fancy sayings on it that people read and then they never read again, but they're there on the wall for decoration. They would write those inscriptions on the walls too. This is an inscription that was found on the floor of a house in Debon in what would be Jordan today. And at one time it was on the wall. When the wall collapsed, they found it on the floor, but it was part of a wall. And this area of the inscription has the name Balaam. Matter of fact, it has not only Balaam, but his father's name, Beor. And it's from the area where Balaam lived in the Bible, and it's from the time period of Balaam. And it even describes him as an itinerant prophet. And so you put all those things together, there's a quite high probability that this inscription actually is mentioning a biblical character, Balaam, son of Beor, the one that went to Israel to curse them, the prophet for hire, and the angel stood in front of the donkey and he talked. That Balaam. So there are instances where you find extra biblical mention of what may be biblical characters in this plaster or ceramic coating on the wall. This is how it was found. There's just fragments on the floor and it was pieced back together. All right, clay was also used for feet. You may have heard the phrase clay feet, feet of clay. It's possible that that figure of speech, feet of clay, may go back to this aspect of the ancient world that whenever they cast their statues, their idols, the casting process was really quite complex, and so they didn't have a lot of appendages. Well, let me just show you. If you've seen Greek art, many times you have something like this in Greek art, but these fingers and these arms are hard to cast. So oftentimes in the ancient world they cast people like this because it's just like one solid tube. In fact, you can tell some of the older statues because it's just one solid tube. The feet were hard to cast. You could have the hands down to the side so you didn't have to cast the hands, but the feet were hard to cast, and so they wouldn't cast them. They'd just stop at the lower part of the skirt or whatever, and then they would put the feet in, and they would set the statue on top of the feet. And oftentimes the feet were made out of clay. And so you can see this one's beginning to break. And so the weight of the statue over the years would eventually cause the feet of clay to crumble and the statue would fall over. At least that's the idea. I'm telling you that because, first of all, that's the figure of speech, feet of clay, means that you have a weakness. There's one weakness, but it's in the most vulnerable place. And when that weakness shows itself, the whole thing will collapse. But chances are that happened in the past quite often, where their statues collapsed and fell over. There's even one instance, famous instance in the Bible of that happening, where a statue fell over. Do you remember? Children of Israel took the Ark of the Covenant out into battle against the Philistines, kind of like a lucky charm. And things got all out of hand, and the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant, and they took it into their town, Ashkelon, I think it was, and they put it in the temple of Dagon, their fish god. And that night, the statue or the idol of Dagon fell on his face in front of the Ark of the Covenant. So they stood him back up, and he fell over again. They propped him in the corner, and he fell over. They just couldn't keep him standing up straight. And then they started developing these strange tumors. So the priest said you need to make like golden tumors, and that would get rid of the tumors, and that didn't work. So they put the Ark of the Covenant in another Philistine city, and they had the same problems. They moved it from city to city. So finally they just put it on a cart with some cows that had just had calves, and they left their calves and took it back to the Israelites. It's all there in the Bible. You can read about it. That Hebrew word translated tumor, they developed tumors. It was a very vague word. They knew it was had something to do with the body and some malfunctioning of the body. They didn't really know beyond that what it was because there were so few instances of it in context. Well, when they excavated at Ugarit, they found a large library. And the Ugaritic language has the same Semitic roots as the Hebrew. And they found that word many times in the Ugaritic text to where they're fairly confident now that that word in the Hebrew Bible that's translated tumor actually means hemorrhoids. So they were making golden hemorrhoids to try to appease the gods and